Welcome to Crimson Ed Talks. I'm your host, Fangzhou Jiang, or you can call me FZ. I'm sitting down here today with Brad Latilla-Campbell. Before we get started, Brad, first, thank you for joining us. And can you give everybody a quick, brief overview of yourself and your background?
Sure. Thanks, FC. Yeah, as you said, my name's Brad. I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa, and I studied in the States at Harvard University, where I got a BA in Social Studies and a citation in Mandarin Chinese. And then for the last few years, I've worked in college admissions, first as an athletic, helping students find athletic scholarships to the US, and then at Crimson as a strategist and a country manager.
Incredible background here, Brad. I'm sure a lot of students want to follow your path, going all the way to Harvard as an international student. I can totally relate to that experience as well. Given that I was once an international student studying in Australia, followed by Stanford and Harvard and a few other institutions, international students often have a lot of questions about the complicated, college admissions process and the experience of navigating this process, especially outside of their home country. So, Brad, when you think back to the old days when you were applying to universities outside of South Africa, what was your main concerns about this whole process?
Well, for me, FC, the main concern was figuring out what all of the different acronyms meant. For instance, what was an SAT or an ACT? Why did it matter? Where could I write it? How did I study for it? That was really, really difficult to figure out. And there wasn't a lot of material available to tell me what to do in that situation, because this was nearly 15 years ago. I also struggled to work out how to figure out my GPA, what that meant and how it translated from South African marks, because there was no converter available at the time and not a lot on the internet as well. And my teachers didn't have any experience with converting a South African grade or mark to an American GPA, which was really, really scary. I also didn't know which colleges to apply to. And so I ended up applying basically to only the ones that were the most difficult to get into, just because I'd heard of them, not because of any kind of fit or any kind of draw to the personality or what I wanted to study, simply because they were famous and I'd seen them in the movies or on TV shows. So those were some of the top concerns that I had, as well as filling out that entire Common App in a way that made sense to the universities that were receiving it and not necessarily to a South African system that I was used to.
You're absolutely right, Brad. I can relate to that as well over my, the last few years of me, advising a lot of students going through this process. Often students and parents get really overwhelmed by these acronyms, these new concepts, GPA, SAT, ACT, TOEFL, IELTS. A lot of them just hear about this really for the first time. So understand what they are, preparing for them, have a good game plan, and reach the level that is suitable to their overall profile. It's just so incredible. There are, many top institutions in the U.S., Ivy League universities, as well as other private institutions, public institutions, liberal arts colleges, you name it. Lots of options to choose from. Finding that fit is very, very crucial. Let's talk a little bit more about the fit, right? So you went to Harvard, one of the best, most prestigious universities in the US and, arguably around the world. So what do you think is the type of student that will thrive at Harvard?
I think the type of student that thrives at Harvard is one who likes to lead and take on the initiative, aside obviously from being very academic. But Harvard is filled with and likes to be filled with, from what I can tell, leaders, people who are going to or who want to change the world in some way by being a trailblazer. And I know we've heard statistics from people at Crimson Education who tell us that 75% of their class at Harvard, and I think kind of this is in my years as well, was either the head prefect at their school or the editor of the newspaper. Strong leadership roles which kind of show popularity and recognize achievement among the student bodies. And I think that those are the types of students that Harvard really likes to admit, aside obviously from the really strong academic side that lots of those students will have.
Totally. And because of that, I guess the particular type that Harvard is seeking, they often look at, a range of factors. That's why they call their process holistic evaluation, which is very different from the processes used by many other countries around the world, which means that they look beyond grades. Although GPA, SAT performance is very important, they look at your extracurricular involvement, your leadership, your community contribution, and then they kind of make a a final call on whether you're a future leader that really fit into this profile. So very important to understand that and avoid spending too much time on just a singular factor that is only part of the equation. You also mentioned a term called the Common App, and you said you have to navigate through that. So can you elaborate on, what the Common App is and how you can even sort of like navigate that process?
Sure. The Common App is the kind of universal portal that you use to apply to many universities in the US. Lots, but not all, will sign up to it. So you can fill out one application with all of your details and then send that in to multiple universities, which is certainly very different from what we're used to in South Africa, which is filling out individual applications and sending them to each university at a time. But this Common App includes a lot of things that are important to the holistic application, like you say, one of which is the 10 extracurricular and activities slots, which shows what you do during your high school years outside of the classroom, and also critically the personal statement, which is kind of a long form essay about yourself as a student when you're applying to a US university. And those things are not kind of generally required when applying to universities in other parts of the world, and are really important when you're trying to get into the top elite universities in the US. How you order them, how you write about them, and the very limited space that's given to you is really, really important and is taken very, very seriously by those top universities.
Definitely. The Common App process sounds definitely, daunting to some students who are new to this. But I do think that the benefit, as Brad mentioned, is that you only need to do it once. And then that enables you to apply to many, many institutions across the US so that you don't have to file individual applications. That actually makes the process more streamlined and easier as you proceed. And finally, I believe a lot of international students would be wondering about the cost of attendance. So can you tell us a little bit more about the financial aid and the scholarship available in the US and what that process looks like?
Yeah, the financial aid and scholarship money available in the US is probably more than in most places in the world. However, it is limited generally when you're looking as an international student. So there are some schools which are what they term need blind, which means they don't take into account whether you're looking for financial aid when you apply. And that means that basically if you get into university at that college, they'll commit to paying what your family cannot contribute. Some schools are need aware, which means they will take into account how much financial aid you require, which is like a bursary or a needs-based aid. And they'll have a certain amount to give out to international students and will kind of make their choices based on that. Some colleges, in fact, will not have any financial aid available at all for international students and will expect all international students to kind of pay the full price of tuition at the university. And at some state schools, sometimes they even charge international students more than they charge domestic students for a variety of reasons. So there is kind of a range of prices that you'll be looking at when you are applying to the US, but it's important to do your research and see which of the colleges you're applying to offer financial aid to international students, and what chance you'll have of getting the money you need to attend the university. But on top of that, you can look for merit scholarships, whether that be academics, culturals, or sport is a really, really big one in the US, which can help close the gap in terms of what you're willing to pay or able to pay and the total cost of tuition at the university that you're looking to apply to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Brad, you summarized this super, super well. I think one interesting note is that a lot of international students are discouraged from applying to U.S. colleges because of the sheer bill size that's often published on the college website. But if you look inside further, you will see that a lot of the schools do offer very generous financial aid. A lot of our international students from various countries, they often end up paying less than what they would pay if they stayed locally. So there are definitely a lot of those opportunities available. But as Brett said, it's not uniform across the board. So please do your research or talk to trusted advisors to make sure that you have a right path for you. So, wow, there's so much to talk about. We can really go on for hours about this topic. We'll continue our conversation in the next episode of Crimson Net Talks. Thanks, Brett, for joining us today. We'll speak soon.
Thanks, FC.